I learned the hard way that rich people could make an insult sound like table manners. The woman who did it wore diamonds the size of sugar cubes and spoke without looking at me, which somehow made it worse. "Careful with the trays," she said to no one and everyone, lifting her champagne glass while the dining room shimmered gold around her. "Girls from Belandi's line have sticky fingers." "Debt teaches ugly habits," nobody gasped. They just went still in that expensive way the powerful did, as if silence itself had been trained. My hands were full of pistachio cannoli. I did not drop them. I did not answer. I set the tray down on the linen, heard a few forks scrape china, and nodded like I had not just been flayed alive in front of 24 people who smelled like money and old grudges. Then I walked into the kitchen, before my face betrayed me. The Salvetter estate kitchen was the size of my father's old bakery, all copper pans, white tile, and industrial ovens humming beneath a ceiling crossed with dark beams. Saucepans steamed. Stock reduced somewhere at the back. Men with guns stood outside both doors, pretending not to be listening. This was not catering. This was a kingdom with burners. Maria Conti took one look at me and swore in Italian under her breath. "Back corner," she said softly, "before I kill a donor with a soup ladle." I made it to the marble prep table near the mixers. My throat closed anyway. I put both palms on the cold stone, breathed once, twice, no good. So I reached for the bowl of diplomat cream, picked up the whisk, and started again. If I stopped moving, I would cry harder. If I cried harder, someone would come pity me. I would have rather swallowed glass. My tears came quietly. That was the only mercy. One slipped down, then another. I wiped them away with the back of my wrist and kept whisking. Cream, air, fold, again. My fingers shook so hard the metal chimed against the bowl. The kitchen doors opened behind me. I knew it wasn't Maria because the room changed. That was the only way I could explain it. The air drew taut. The low clatter of staff dimmed. Even the men by the pantry straightened as if pulled upward by a single invisible string. I did not turn around right away. Then I heard it. Click. A silver lighter, sharp, soft. Distinct enough to cut through every other sound. I looked up. Dante Salvetter stood in the doorway in a black suit that fit him too well to be accidental. Not flashy, worse than flashy, controlled. His tie was loosened a fraction. His dark hair was combed back from a hard face that looked carved, not born. There was no hurry in him, no anger on display. Men like him did not need to show what they could do. He held the lighter loosely in one hand. He wasn't smoking. He just turned it over once across his knuckles, then stilled it. His gaze dropped to the bowl, to my hand gripping the whisk, to the tears I had not hidden fast enough. "Everyone out," he said. The kitchen emptied in under 5 seconds. Maria hesitated, met my eyes, then his, then left with murder in her posture and a stockpot in her hands. I was alone with him before I could think of a single smart thing to say. I set the whisk down. "I can explain." "Can you?" His voice was low, unhurried, impossible to read. Heat crawled into my face. "No." That almost made something move at the corner of his mouth, but it didn't. He came closer. I noticed stupid things because I was nervous. The faint, clean scent of cedar and cold air on his coat. The shine of his watch. The way he stopped at the other side of the table rather than crowding me, which somehow felt more dangerous than if he had. "You kept working," he said. I blinked. "What, after she insulted you?" His eyes dipped once to the cream. "You kept working." I stared at him. Of all the things I thought the head of the Salvetter family might say to me in a kitchen at 10:30 at night, that had not been one of them. "Dessert still had to go out," I said. My voice sounded thin. "The guests didn't do anything." He looked at me for so long my skin prickled. Then his thumb rolled over the lighter again. Click. "That's a lie," he said. "Most of them did." I swallowed. He moved around the table then, close enough for me to see the tiny white scar at the edge of his jaw. He reached past me without touching me and dipped one finger into the bowl, tasted the cream. His eyes stayed on mine the whole time. Too much salt. Mortification burned hotter than the insult had. "I know." One tear, humiliatingly late, slid free. I turned my face before he could see it. He saw it. That was the worst part, not that I cried. That he watched me do it and did not look away to spare me. His hand landed on a folded kitchen towel beside me. He pushed it across the marble until it touched my wrist. Not comfort. Not quite. But not nothing. What did she call you? He asked. I laughed once because if I didn't I would fall apart. A thief by blood. And are you? No, that answer came fast enough to be true. He nodded once. My brother owes people money, I said before I could stop myself, which apparently makes me decorative evidence. Your brother owes the wrong people money. The room tilted. You know Leo, I know of him. Fear arrived clean and cold. Where is he? Something shuddered behind his eyes. If I had him, Dante said, you would not be asking me that from across a table. That should have relieved me. It didn't. He looked at the bowl again, then back at me. What's your name? Sophia Belandi. His gaze dropped to the small burn on my hand, a pale blister near my thumb where hot sugar had kissed me an hour ago. You handle flame for a living. I make sugar flowers, I said, another glance at the whisk, my wet face, my trembling hands that had not quit. Little flame, he said. It was not kind. It was worse than kind. It sounded like he was naming a fact about me I had not agreed to show him. I need to go home, I said. No, the word landed softly. Final, a door locking from the outside. I forgot to breathe for a second. Excuse me, your brother took something that belongs to a man who wants leverage. Dante slipped the lighter into his pocket. Tonight you became leverage. I am not staying here. You are tonight, my pulse hammered. You can't just decide that. He met my eyes with an expression so calm it frightened me more than anger would have. I already did. I should have shouted, thrown the bowl, run for the back gate. Instead, I stood there with salt on my tongue and cream on my fingers, and realized that every armed man in this house would obey him before I finished my first scream. Dante reached for the whisk I had abandoned and set it back into my hand. Finish the dessert, he said. Then Mario will take you to the East Wing. I hated that my fingers closed around it. He turned to leave. At the door, he paused without looking back. The woman who insulted you will not be invited here again, he said. But you, little flame, are not leaving. Then he was gone. The lighter clicked once more in the hallway, and that was the sound the rest of my life opened to. I did not sleep. That sentence sounds dramatic, but the truth was less elegant. I lay in a room larger than my family's entire apartment and stared at a painted ceiling, while every terrible possibility took its turn at my throat. The East Wing guest suite had silk curtains, carved furniture, and a lock I discovered, after checking 3 times, worked only from the outside. That was a detail you felt in your spine. At 6, I gave up and got dressed in yesterday's black slacks and a fresh white blouse someone had placed on the chair while I was in the bathroom. I did not want to think about that. I wanted coffee. I wanted my own chipped mug. I wanted my brother to stop being missing and start being stupid in person where I could yell at him. Instead, I opened the bedroom door to find a man the width of a refrigerator, standing in the hall with a tablet in one hand and a boiled egg in the other. He brightened when he saw me, which was not a reaction I expected from a human weapon. Ah, the hostage is up. I am not a hostage. He peeled the egg. Excellent. Very healthy attitude. He was in his 30s, broad-shouldered, expensively dressed, and wore his dark hair too carefully for someone with a scar on his chin. He took one mournful bite of the egg like it had personally offended him. I'm Gio Rosso, he said. Head of logistics, occasional intimidation, full-time victim of Maria Conti's carbohydrates. I blinked. What? He sighed toward heaven. She loves me, I think, but in the way a cat loves a wounded bird. Every time I say no bread, she sends focaccia brushed with olive oil and pity. Despite myself, I almost smiled. Gio pointed the egg at me. There, keep doing that. Doing what? Looking like a person. This house gets so severe before noon. He led me downstairs, through hallways paneled in dark wood. Past oil paintings of dead salvators, who all looked capable of ordering executions between courses. Armed men nodded at Gio. Nobody nodded at me. The kitchen, at least, smelled like something human: coffee, yeast, butter, simmering tomatoes. Maria stood at the stove in a navy dress and apron, commanding 6 burners and 2 assistants with the authority of a field marshal. She looked up. "You're pale. I was kidnapped," politely. "Oh," she handed me an espresso. "That happens here." Gio pressed one hand to his chest. "See. Nobody respects the emotional burden I carry." Maria turned and shoved a plate of bomboloni into his hands. He stared at them in betrayal. "This is attempted murder. This is breakfast. I am on a plan. You are on my nerves." He looked at me solemnly. "If I die, tell the priest I fought bravely against sugar." That was the first time I laughed in the Salvetter house. It felt wrong, necessary, like breathing after a slap. Then Dante walked in and the room remembered itself. He wore charcoal this morning instead of black. No tie, holster visible under the jacket when he moved. Men at the back straightened. Maria did not. I liked her immediately for that. His eyes found me as if they had expected exactly where I would be. "Eat," he said, "not good morning, not are you rested." Just that one word, because apparently the man's social skills had been replaced with stone at birth. "I'd rather go home." Dante poured coffee into a white cup and took it black. "Denied. I have a job. You had a catering shift. A life, then." He looked at me over the rim of the cup. "Temporary things always sound permanent when they're threatened." Anger flashed hot enough to steady me. "Are you always this kind to your guests? Only the ones likely to run." Gio, traitor that he was, pretended sudden interest in his bomboloni. Maria's mouth twitched. Dante set the cup down. "Your brother Leo Belandi took financial records from Matteo Vescari 3 nights ago." The name meant nothing to me, and too much at once. Matteo Vescari was the kind of man people mentioned in my neighborhood, with lowered voices and faster steps. "I don't know anything about that." "I believe you." That startled me enough to show on my face. "Then why am I here?" "Because Vescari will assume your brother told you where he hid them. And if I didn't, you still matter to the men who want answers." His voice never rose. That was the terrifying part. He could say something like, "You are in danger because of your blood," as calmly as a doctor saying your tea is getting cold. I folded my arms. "So what are your rules?" His gaze dropped there briefly, then lifted again. "You do not leave the property without me or Gio. You do not answer unknown numbers. You do not walk into rooms unless Maria or I tell you it's safe. And you stay away from the West office." "Why that room?" "Because I said so." I hated how much I wanted to disobey him on principle. Maria set toast in front of me. "Eat before your courage becomes stupidity." Dante turned to go. Halfway to the door, he stopped. "You'll use the downstairs pastry kitchen today," he said without facing me. "Maria tells me Belandi's sfogliatelle are worth surviving for." That made me frown. "You had my bakery researched." "No," he said. "I had it remembered." He left me with that. I spent the morning in a pastry kitchen twice as well equipped as any place I had ever worked. Marble counters, copper molds, a sugar lamp, even a humidity-controlled cabinet for delicate work. It should have felt like heaven. Instead, it felt like a beautiful cage. Still, my hands knew what to do before the rest of me did. I made dough, rested it, rolled it whisper-thin with lard and patience, filled shells with sweetened ricotta, candied orange, and finely chopped chocolate. Maria watched once from the doorway, then nodded like she had accepted a private challenge. By noon, the rhythm had almost calmed me. Then Dante came back. He stood at the threshold, jacket off, sleeves rolled. A bruise darkened one knuckle. I hated that I noticed that first. He watched me dust sugar over a tray. "You're angry," he said. "Yes." "Good," I turned. "Good. It means you haven't mistaken safety for gratitude." The tray in my hands felt suddenly heavier. "What if I don't feel safe?" His face altered so slightly another person might have missed it. "Then I haven't done my job yet." That should not have landed where it did. It did anyway. He stepped closer, not touching, never quite touching. His gaze went to the flower on my wrist, then back up. "For now," he said quietly, "this is the only home you're allowed." Then he walked away like the sentence had cost him nothing. It cost me the rest of the day. By the third day, I understood that power had a sound. It sounded like Italian spoken too softly in hallways, like shoes going silent when Dante passed. Like the pause before men answered him, not because they feared the question, but because getting it wrong might alter the shape of their lives. The Salvetter estate ran on ritual and menace. Breakfast in the family kitchen, meetings in the West Wing, deliveries checked twice at the gate. Weapons hidden in plain sight, under suit jackets and sideboards, and the easy posture of men who had known violence long enough to stop performing it. I kept to the pastry rooms and pretended that if I measured carefully enough, the world outside the oven doors might become manageable. That morning, Maria assigned me dessert for a private meeting. 8 men, she said. No nuts, 1 diabetic, and if you poison anybody, choose wisely. I appreciate the confidence. She patted my cheek. If I didn't trust you, you'd be peeling potatoes. So I made what my father used to call an honest dessert. Bitter chocolate sponge on the bottom, burnt orange cream in the middle. A shell of clear caramelized sugar over the top, spun thin and hardened until it looked like glass catching light. Gia wandered in halfway through and stared at the finished trays. You made feelings. I did not look up from torching the sugar seam. It's dessert. No, this is one of those women things. He pointed dramatically. The outside says don't touch me. The inside says I will absolutely ruin your life if you do. I snorted before I could stop myself. What is it called? I hesitated. Glass heart. Gio pressed a hand to his chest. Madonna. I need to write that down. You need a hobby. I have one, Maria. He lowered his voice. She's pretending not to love me because I once said her lasagna was heavy. I stared at him. You said that to an Italian woman who cooks for a mafia family. In my defense, I was concussed. That is not a defense. He stole a spoonful of cream and nearly moaned. If the boss smiles after eating this, call a priest. It will be a sign. I should have laughed harder. Instead, I asked the question I had been choking on for 2 days. What is Dante Salvator really keeping me for? Gio's expression changed, not closed exactly but careful. Protection. That is what everyone says when the bars are velvet. He sighed. Look, Sophia, in this house there are true things and full things. Sometimes you only get one at a time. Before I could decide whether to hate that answer, footsteps sounded in the corridor. Gio muttered, speaking of limited emotional availability. Dante entered with Cesare Benedetti beside him. I had met Cesare only once so far. Silver-haired, immaculate in his 60s, with the grave, disciplined face of a priest if priests carried 2 phones and likely knew where several bodies were. He had been kind to me in the way old judges were kind to witnesses, professionally, from a distance. His gaze went to the desserts. Bellandi, Mr. Benedetti, Consigliere, Gio corrected under his breath, then winced when Maria threw a towel at his head from across the room. Dante stepped to the prep table. What is this? Dessert. His eyes lifted, dry as old whiskey. You continue to be brave in the smallest possible ways. I should have shut up. I didn't. It's bitter on the bottom, I said, because his gaze on me made me nervous, and nervous always made me talk more. Orange in the middle, sugar shell on top. It looks strong until pressure hits the wrong place. Nobody said anything. Maria, somewhere behind me, went very still. Gia looked between me and Dante like he had suddenly found religion. I realized too late I had spoken like a person explaining herself to strangers. Dante's gaze held mine for one long second too many. Then he looked down at the tray. Send them in 10 minutes, he said. He turned away. For reasons I could not explain, that felt worse than if he had stayed. When the meeting ended an hour later, tension moved through the house like smoke under a door. Men crossed hallways faster. Voices dropped further. A black SUV pulled up outside the west entrance. Somebody had been hit at the docks. Somebody had answered back. I did not ask names because names in houses like this came with funerals attached. I was cleaning sugar off the counter when Dante came back alone. He stood on the other side of the island and ate one of the glass hearts with a dessert fork he must have taken from the meeting room. He cracked the sugar shell first, softly, deliberately. Too much bitterness? I asked before I could stop myself. He swallowed. No, that was all. Then his eyes dropped to the recipe notebook by my elbow. My father's old black ledger book, flour-smudged and held together with a failing elastic band. You bring that everywhere, he said. It was my father's. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Keep it close, I stiffened. Why? He set the fork down. Because men are already moving against me, he said. And if your brother touched Vescari's money, little flame, they will move through you to get there. I hated how the nickname landed now, not softer, not yet, but more personal. Less like an observation, more like a claim he had not earned. And if I refused to be moved through, his gaze went to my mouth, just for a second. That was the first time, then he looked away. Refusal, Dante said quietly, is only useful when the room allows it. He left before I found an answer. Dante POV, she had described Rosa without knowing it, not the facts. Worse, the shape. Strong on the outside, fragile where no one saw. He had spent 12 years teaching himself not to hear ghosts in women's voices. And then Sofia Belandi stood in his kitchen smelling like orange zest and burnt sugar, and handed him grief in a glass shell. When he looked at her mouth and stepped back, it was not discipline. It was survival. That night, I stood by the east wing window and watched rain stripe the courtyard lights. Somewhere below, a car engine turned over. Men left with guns under their jackets. War had begun its slow walk toward the house. I put my father's recipe book under my pillow before I slept. For the first time, I wondered if that was exactly where someone wanted it. The first time Dante touched me, the house was losing power, not all at once. This was Salvator money, nothing so vulgar as total darkness. The lights only flickered, dipped, came back harder. But the pastry refrigeration alarm started shrieking like a panicked animal, and Maria yelled my name from somewhere near the service hall. Freezer seals, she barked. Now, before the butter dies and I kill everyone myself. I was halfway across the kitchen when the lights cut to emergency red. The estate changed shape instantly. Marble and copper became shadows. The low generator hum rolled in beneath the silence. Somewhere deeper in the house, men started moving fast. I grabbed the flashlight by the prep sink and headed for the pastry freezer. Cold hit me the second I yanked the heavy door open. Trays of laminated dough, cream, berries, a week's worth of sugar work. If the seal went, the flashlight died in my hand. Perfect, I muttered. I used my shoulder to hold the door and reached up for the emergency latch. My fingers brushed metal, slipped, and then the door slammed shut behind me with enough force to punch fear straight through my ribs. Dark, white cold, my own breath suddenly too loud. I spun and shoved the bar. Nothing, no panic, I told myself. No panic, this was not a locked trunk. This was a freezer with an interior release. I felt along the wall, found the mechanism, pulled. Still nothing. The outside lock had jammed. Air scraped in and out of me too fast. I pressed both palms flat to steel and tried to think through the cold. Then, from the other side, a man's voice. Sophia, Dante, I had never been so relieved to hear a human being in my life. The latch is stuck, I said, and hated how thin my voice came out. Step back. Metal struck metal outside. Once. Twice. Then the seal tore open with a violent crack, and Dante was there in the red wash of emergency light, coat gone, tie missing. One shoulder, braced against the door like he had personally argued the steel into obedience. I stepped toward him too fast, slipped on the frost, and would have hit the floor if his hand hadn't caught my wrist. His grip closed all the way around it, warm, immovable. For one suspended second, neither of us let go. The emergency lights painted his face in harsh red and shadow. There was a cut high on his cheekbone I had not seen before, fresh enough to still shine. Men shouted in the corridor behind him. He ignored them. You're freezing, he said. I had no clever answer. My teeth were starting to chatter. He pulled me out of the freezer and shrugged his suit jacket around my shoulders in one economical movement. It was still warm from his body. That bothered me more than the grip on my wrist had. I can walk, I said. Do it then. there was the Dante I understood. He steered me, without really touching me anymore, which was somehow worse, toward the pastry kitchen just as the generator lights came back in full. Maria arrived with a blanket and outrage. "If this house burns, let it be after service. I'll note your priorities," Dante said. Gio came flying in behind her, breathless, holding a half-eaten protein bar. "Is she alive?" Maria said if anything happened to the pastry chef, the boss would level a district, and I live in that district. Maria smacked the back of his head. He clutched his bar in betrayal. "This is why love fails." Despite everything, I laughed. It came out shaky. Dante looked at me then, just once, as if the sound had caught him off guard. Later, after the freezer was repaired and the men with tools had left, I found him alone in the prep hall washing blood from his knuckles at the sink. I stopped in the doorway. The blood was not all his. He looked up at my reflection in the dark window over the sink. "You should be upstairs. I came for your jacket. Keep it." I did not move. "Who got hurt?" "No one who matters to you." That should have ended it. Instead, I heard myself say, "That isn't the same as nobody." His hands stilled under the water. For a second, I thought he would dismiss me again. Then he shut off the tap. "Vescari hit a warehouse I own," he said. This was the answer. A pause. "And my brother, still missing." There was something in the way he said it that made me step closer. "You're not telling me something." A humorless breath touched his mouth. "Many things. I should have been frightened. I was. But something in me had grown tired of being handled like a glass dish." "What did my brother take?" Dante dried his hands slowly. "Ledgers. Account routes, payment chains. For what?" "Children's home donations." His face went colder. "That is what the paperwork says." The room shifted under me. My father had donated bread to St. Agnes' home every Christmas until he died. "I know that place," I whispered. "I know." That answer was so quiet it made my skin lift. He was watching me too closely now, measuring whether I understood what I had just stepped near. I thought of my father's notebook under my pillow. "My recipe book," I said. "That's why you told me to keep it close." He did not answer. That was answer enough. "You think Leo hid something in it?" "I think your brother was smarter than he looked." I almost smiled at that, because it was true and infuriating and so like Leo. Then I looked at Dante's bleeding knuckles again. "What happened to your hand?" His jaw tightened. "Nothing." "That's a lie." A beat passed. "I broke the freezer lock." "No." I hated how soft my voice went. "Before that." He turned away, not dramatic, final, so I did the stupid thing. I stepped forward and touched the white scar on his jaw with the lightest brush of my fingers. His whole body went still. The world narrowed to that one point of contact. I snatched my hand back. "I shouldn't have." "No," he said, and his voice had changed. Rougher, lower. "You shouldn't." He looked at me with something too hard to name. Then, because apparently fate enjoys humiliating me, the lights flickered again, and I jumped. Dante's hand moved before mine did, closing around my wrist in the same place as before. The same ring of warmth. "This house won't fail you twice in one night," he said. I couldn't tell if he meant the generators or himself. Maria called for me from the kitchen. Dante let go instantly. As I walked away, he said, "Your brother didn't steal from me, Sophia." I turned. "He stole from Vescari," Dante said. "That matters." It was the first real answer he had given me. It was not nearly the last. I found the first stitch at 2 in the morning. Insomnia had become the estate's most consistent gift to me. I sat cross-legged on the bed with my father's recipe book open across my lap, tracing grease-marked pages filled with his handwriting. Flour ratios, glaze notes, tiny corrections in the margins. The smell of old vanilla lived in the paper. It felt like touching his hands. Then my thumb caught on the inner spine, a line of thread. Black, clumsy, recent. My heart tripped. I went to the bathroom, locked the door out of principle, even though I doubted the lock had much legal authority here, and used a manicure scissors from the vanity tray to cut the thread loose. Folded into the hollowed spine was a strip of waxed paper and a key no bigger than my little finger. The paper held only one line, in Leo's handwriting, "For the man who still pays the priest." I stared at it until the words stopped looking like words. Dante paid a priest. For Saint Agnes. For someone there. For what? I wrapped the key and note back into the wax paper just as my phone returned to me that morning with all unknown contacts wiped, buzzed on the sink. Unknown number. My entire body went cold. I answered on the second ring. Leo, breathing, then my brother's voice, ragged and fast. Sophie, don't hang up. I had to brace one hand on the vanity. Where are you? Doesn't matter, listen to me. If Salvator has the book, you can't let Vescari get the key. Leo, I didn't take from Salvator, I took proof. Saint Agnes is dirty. Kids, accounts, transport routes. A sound in the background. A slammed door. He dropped his voice. Don't trust the one who never raises his voice. The line died. I stood there with the phone against my ear until the silence started to hiss. Then I did the worst thing I could have done. I kept it to myself. By noon, Dante was hosting lunch in the sunroom with 3 captains, Cesare, and a city councilman whose smile looked rented. Maria wanted individual desserts. My hands were steady. My mind was not. I made olive oil cake with whipped mascarpone and sugared lemons. Then I smelled it, not on the cake, in the syrup. A thin, bitter almond shadow under the citrus. My stomach dropped. Maria, I said quietly, don't send these. She looked up sharply. Why? I held out the spoon. Smell, her face changed after half a second. Madonna. We moved fast after that, too fast for panic. The kitchen doors shut, trays were pulled, new syrup went on. Dante arrived before Maria even called for him, as if danger had its own line directly into his bloodstream. What is it? Poison, Maria said. His eyes went to me. I hated that I understood immediately why, not because he blamed me, because he wanted to know how I knew. The syrup, I said. It was wrong. He crossed the room. You tasted it. I smelled it. That stopped him. You can tell that from scent. My father taught me everything starts there. Dante looked at the ruined tray, then back at me. Something unreadable deepened in his face. Who made the syrup? One of the new kitchen boys, Maria said. He's gone. Of course he was. The room filled with men after that. Orders, phones. The dense silence of armed anger. Dante gave all of it away from me without appearing to. He moved one step left, and suddenly I was behind him. Shielded by the line of his body from the chaos he had called in. I noticed because I was trying not to. When the others left, he stayed. I need the truth now, he said. There are moments where lying becomes impossible not because you are brave, but because the room itself refuses to hold it. I took the wax paper from my pocket. Dante unfolded it. Read the note once. Then again, his face did not change. His stillness did. Where did you find this? In the spine. Who else knows? My brother called me this morning. That got his attention in a way the key had not. You answered an unknown number? Yes. Sophia. It was not a raised voice. It was worse. Disappointment sharpened into fear. I know, I said. I know, but it was Leo. His jaw flexed once. What did he say? I repeated it exactly. Not every word. Not the part where hearing my brother alive had cracked something loose in me, but enough. Don't trust the one who never raises his voice. When I finished, Dante looked toward the window where the gardens lay bright and stupidly beautiful in the afternoon sun. Do you trust you? A pause. Yes, I should have said no. Instead, I said the true thing. I don't know. That was the most dangerous answer I'd ever given anyone. He stepped closer, not touching, the familiar almost of him. Enough to make the air change around my throat. Good, he said quietly. You shouldn't know yet. I looked at his mouth and hated myself a little. Who is the priest? I asked. His gaze shifted. There, a hit. Someone from before, he said. Before what? Before I became this. There was more in that sentence than he meant to give me. I felt it. Then footsteps sounded in the corridor. Cesare appeared, silver and composed. Dante, the councilman is leaving. His eyes moved to me, then the note in Dante's hand. For one small, strange second, I thought I saw recognition in his face. Gone too fast to trust, Dante folded the paper and put it in his pocket. We're done here. I should have left it there. Instead, late that evening, when the same unknown number lit my phone again, I went to the service courtyard alone. I told myself I was choosing my brother over my fear. I told myself a lot of things. The gate camera watched me. The gravel was wet from rain. I could hear music drifting faintly from the staff entrance to the old ballroom. "Leo," I whispered. A hand clamped over my mouth from behind. A voice at my ear. "Wrong brother." Then the dark opened. I remembered 3 things clearly about the ambush. The smell of wet wool over the hand on my mouth. The crack of a gunshot so close it punched the air out of the night. And Dante's voice, somewhere beyond the panic, saying my name like it was the only command his body recognized. The rest came in torn pieces. I drove my heel down hard and tasted blood where I bit the stranger's palm. He cursed. I twisted free just as headlights washed the courtyard. Men shouted. One dropped. Another grabbed my arm. I saw a flash of Dante crossing the gravel at impossible speed, coat flaring, gun already up. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He shot one man in the knee, another in the throat, and kept moving. Efficiency was more horrifying than rage. Someone hit me from the side. I fell against the stone wall hard enough to see white. Then Dante was there, one arm around me, pivoting his body over mine as glass shattered somewhere behind us. "Inside," he said. "I can't. You can." He half pushed, half carried me through the service door while Gio and 2 others returned fire. My legs worked out of sheer insult more than balance. Dante's hand stayed locked at the back of my neck, guiding, shielding, making choices my body could not. We went not to the estate but to a townhouse downtown, all shuttered windows and silent rooms that smelled unused. A safe house, though nothing in me felt safe. My hands would not stop shaking. Neither would my teeth. Dante sat me on the edge of a narrow bed and knelt in front of me to check my head. That unsettled me almost more than the blood on his collar. "Look at me," he said. I did. His cheek was split. His knuckles were raw again. There was another man's blood under his cuff. Any dizziness? Only morally. Something flickered in his eyes, not amusement, not quite. Survival's cousin. He touched the bruise rising at my temple with careful fingers. I inhaled too sharply. He withdrew at once. "Sorry." The word from him landed like a dropped knife. I stared. "Do you even know how to apologize?" "No," his mouth hardened, "but I know when I should have prevented something." He stood and crossed to the small kitchenette. A minute later I heard it, click. The silver lighter. He held it to the burner until blue flame bloomed beneath a dented kettle. The sound threaded straight through me, back to the first night, to cream and salt and the kitchen door. When he set a mug of sweet tea in my hands, I almost cried for a completely different reason than before. "You don't have to be kind because you failed," I whispered. His expression changed. Slowly. As if some internal lock had shifted. "I am not kind," he said. "I am late." I wrapped both hands around the mug to hide that they were still trembling. After a long silence, I said, "You knew Leo was alive before you told me." He did not deny it. That hurt more than I expected. "Because you didn't trust me. Because if you knew, you'd do exactly what you did tonight. That isn't fair." "No." He looked at the floor for a moment, then back at me. "It's accurate." I wanted to argue. I wanted to throw the tea. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Who was Rosa?" He went still. I had not meant to say it aloud. But I'd heard Maria and Gio in the corridor the day before, his sister's name spoken in the soft past tense voices people used for graves. Dante stood by the sink, one hand braced on the counter. "My sister," he said, nothing else. I waited. Finally, in the same quiet tone he used for dangerous truths, he added, "She was humiliated at a dinner. She hid in a kitchen." I thought letting her leave the room alone would preserve her dignity. He looked at me then, and there was no shield in his face at all. She was dead by morning. The room lost all air. I set the mug down before I dropped it. "Dante," he shook his head once, because names were easier than pity. For a moment he said nothing. Then very low, almost to himself, "It wasn't your face that did it." I barely breathed. "It was the whisk," he said. "Your hands were shaking, you were crying. And you kept working because other people were still waiting to be fed." His gaze held mine now like he regretted the honesty and would not take it back. No one in my world does that, he said. No one protects a room from their pain. You did. Something inside me gave way so quietly I might have mistaken it for relief. He came back to the bed slowly, as if approaching an animal that might bolt. I should have told you about Leo, he said. I found him 2 days ago. He's hidden. Injured but alive. The anger should have hit first. It did, then the rest of it. Relief so fierce I covered my mouth. You let me think, I know. Tears came anyway. I hated them. I hated that he was the one seeing them again. This time he did not hand me a towel across the table. He knelt, not touching, just close enough that I could see the fracture running under his control. I whispered, I don't know what to do with you. His eyes lowered briefly to my mouth, then lifted again. Another almost, worse than the others. You do nothing, he said. I do the stopping. There it was, the thing between us, finally named by the edge rather than the center. My breath went shallow. If you keep looking at me like that, I said, I won't know how to help you. He shut his eyes for 1 second, opened them. Little flame. Nothing cold in it now, nothing safe either. I looked at his bruised mouth and said the only true thing I had. I am not afraid of you. His answer came like a wound. That, he said, is what terrifies me. Then he leaned in, not far, not enough, only until his forehead rested once against mine. A first intimacy made of restraint. No kiss, no claim. Just the unbearable fact of him choosing not to take what he wanted. When he pulled back, the room felt colder. Outside, somewhere far off in the city, sirens rose and bled into the night. War had arrived. By the time the sun came up, 2 Salvator warehouses had burned, 1 judge had gone missing. And Gia had been shot through the shoulder, because apparently the universe had finally run out of ways to humble him politely. He complained through the morphine. Tell Maria, he groaned from the estate's medical suite, that if I die, she is forbidden to serve penne at my wake. It gets soggy, Maria, eyes red, adjusted his blanket with unnecessary force. You are not dying. Very romantic, he murmured. We grow closer every bullet. I laughed and then hated myself for it because blood still darkened the cuff of his shirt. Gia winked weakly at me anyway. See. Worth it? That was the problem with people in Dante's world. They made pain sound survivable right up until it wasn't. Maria walked me out afterward and stopped in the hall. You need to decide what you are, she said. I stared at her. What does that mean? In this house, her face softened. A guest, a hostage, a weakness, family. Those things do not stay separate long. I had no answer. Maybe she saw that, because she touched my cheek once and said, if he offers you a door, don't stay because you're afraid to use it. Then she left me in the hall with Gio's blood still under my nails from where I'd helped hold gauze to his shoulder. And I understood what she meant a few minutes later, when Dante called me into the library. He was standing by the fireplace with one hand in his pocket and the other braced on the mantel. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. Not one night. Years. A black car idled outside the front steps. I could hear it through the leaded windows. What is that? I asked. Your way out. The room went so quiet I heard the clock on the shelf click over a minute. Dante turned then. There was a new cut along his throat, hidden badly under the collar of his shirt. Leo is being moved at noon. New papers, new address. If you go with him, Vescari loses his easiest weapon. I stared at him. You're sending me away. I am giving you a choice. No, my voice came sharper than I expected. You're deciding something and making it sound generous. His jaw tightened. If I decided, little flame, the car would already be gone with you in it. That hit because it was true. I folded my arms to stop my hands from shaking. And if I leave, you live. It should have been enough, it wasn't. And if I stay, his gaze held mine for a long, punishing second. Then more people bleed. Gio's pale face flashed through me. Maria's shaking hands, the freezer red light, the safe house, every awful thing my mistake had dragged closer. This is because of the courtyard, I said. This is because war has reached the front door. Same calm tone, same controlled damage, but there was something splintering underneath it now. He crossed the room and set an envelope on the desk between us. Passport, cash, a key. Your brother leaves at noon, the car waits until then. I looked at the envelope, then at him. And if I walk out that gate, that's it? Something moved behind his eyes, closed again. Yes, not a threat, a cost. I took the envelope because not taking it would have been melodrama, and I was too tired for theater. Then I went with one of Dante's men to the clinic downtown where Leo was hidden. My brother looked terrible, better than dead, worse than forgiven. There was a bruise around one eye, stitches at his hairline, and enough guilt in his face to flood a church. Sophie, I should have hit him first. Instead, I hugged him so hard he made a wounded sound into my shoulder. He laughed once weakly. Okay. Maybe hit me a little. You absolute bastard. Fair. We sat in a narrow room that smelled like bleach and old heat while he told me everything too fast. As if speaking before fear caught him could change the facts. St. Agnes hadn't just laundered money. Children had been moved through shell charities for years. Donations came in clean and left dirty. Names disappeared. One of those names belonged to a boy Leo had known when he volunteered there after Dad died. That was why he took the ledgers. Not for money, for proof. And Dante? I asked quietly. Leo scrubbed a hand over his face. He paid Father Tommaso for years, quietly, school repairs, food, legal fees for kids aging out. He thought he was saving the place. A chill slid down my back. He doesn't know the whole thing. He knows enough to want it burned out of the city. Leo looked at me. Sophie, you need to go. He can fight men like Vescari. We can't. We, the life before this. The one with rent overdue and burnt croissants and plans that fit inside ordinary years. At 11:30, I got into the black car. The driver pulled away from the clinic. Manhattan moved past in bright, indifferent flashes. People carrying coffee, women arguing into phones, a florist hosing down buckets on the curb. It all looked unbearably normal. Airport, the driver asked. I should have said yes. Instead, I heard myself say, take me to Mulberry. He glanced at me in the mirror, then obeyed. My father's old bakery sat behind papered windows and police tape. The front glass had been smashed sometime in the night. Flowers streaked the threshold like ash. Someone had painted thief across the shutter in black. My throat closed. There it was, my future if I chose it, running, hiding, watching every room. Carrying shame in my own name until it changed shape and became me. The driver got out to open my door. I didn't take it. I looked once at the ruined shop, once at the envelope in my lap. Then I thought of Dante in the library, making himself let me go because it was safer. Thought of Gio joking through blood loss. Maria's face. The children whose names had vanished into St. Agnes paperwork. Turn around, I said. The driver blinked. Miss Bellandi, turn. Around. When the car rolled back through the Salvator gates, nobody met me outside. Good. I didn't want to be saved from my own choice. I walked through the front hall, through the terrible beauty of polished floors and armed silence, and opened the library door myself. Dante looked up from the desk. For the first time since I'd known him, control actually left his face. You missed the airport, he said. I set the envelope on the desk between us. I know. His gaze dropped to it, back to me. You can still leave. Yes, my voice shook, but it held. That's why this counts. Something dangerous and broken moved behind his stillness. I took one breath. My brother goes, I said. I stay. I want the children out of those books found. I want Matteo stopped. And I am done pretending the life I had is still waiting for me untouched. Dante didn't move, didn't blink. Little flame, he said at last, very quietly, if you stay now, you stay with your eyes open. I know. It cost me the shape of the woman I'd been yesterday. I paid it. That night we opened the key. Not literally, of course. Keys are simple. It was everything attached to it that wasn't. The lockbox sat in a private vault, beneath a church office 3 blocks from St. Agnes, registered to a charity board that no longer officially existed. Dante took me himself, against Gio's loud objections and Maria's louder Italian prayer that translated, roughly, to if either of you die, I will resurrect you only to kill you properly. Gio, his arm in a sling and his shirt half buttoned wrong, pointed at Dante with his good hand. I have been shot for this family in a color-coordinated blazer. Respect my sacrifice and let me come. You're concussed, Dante said. I contain multitudes. You contain pain medication. Gio looked at me solemnly. If Maria cries at my funeral, tell her I knew. Maria smacked the back of his head as we passed. I would cry from relief. He sighed like a tragic poet abandoned by civilization. The church office smelled of candle wax and damp paper. Downstairs, the vault hummed cold and metallic around us while Dante opened the box and pulled out a stack of ledgers, 3 flash drives, and a St. Agnes donor registry bound in cheap blue plastic. I touched the top page and felt my stomach turn. Children's names, intake dates, transfer notations. Codes in the margins. Leo had marked inside recipe ratios in Dad's book so he'd remember which pages mattered. Take only pictures, Dante said. If this disappears now, someone will know. So we did. Page after page under the low fluorescent buzz. My pastry notebook of a life had become a cipher for missing children. The obscenity of it made my hands go numb. Then Dante stopped on one page. I saw the reason a second later. Rosa Salvatore, not as a child, as a donor flag, as leverage, a note beneath it in an old administrative hand, package secured for dinner piece. The room changed around him. Dante, he said nothing. His face went utterly empty, more frightening than anger. He took out his phone and photographed the page once perfectly steady, then we left. Back at the estate, Cesare was waiting in the west sitting room with a decanter and 2 untouched glasses on the sideboard. He looked tired for the first time since I'd known him. Older. The silver in his hair less elegant and more like ash. Well, he asked. Dante handed him a flash drive. Enough to bury half the city. Cesare's eyes went to me. And the other half? We'll scream while it goes, Dante said. I should have felt safer with 2 men in expensive suits talking strategy under warm lamps. Instead, I noticed the glasses on the sideboard and the faint smell rising from one of them. Bitter almond. So faint most people would have missed it. Most people were not raised by a man who taught them that scent could be the difference between sweetness and ruin. Cesare picked up the poisoned glass and held it out to me with the same steady hand he had used for months to pat my shoulder and ask whether I was eating enough. You look pale, Sophia. I took the glass because refusing too early would have warned him. I'll have Maria send tea, I said. Nonsense. His expression stayed grandfather gentle. A sip. Dante was across the room taking a call, not watching us, or pretending not to. I lifted the glass, let the rim touch my mouth, and said a quiet prayer to every saint my father ever baked for. Then I let my wrist loosen. The glass slipped, shattered on the parquet. Everyone went still. Wine spread dark and sharp over the floorboards. Cesare looked at the broken stem, then at me. My fault, I said. My hands, he smiled. I knew then, truly knew. Not because of the poison, because he did not ask if I was cut. Dante turned back into the room and took in the scene in one sweep. His gaze moved from my face to the spilled wine to Cesare. A terrible second passed. Then Cesare sighed and set his own untouched glass down. You always were observant, Belandi. My pulse slammed once. Hard. Dante's voice dropped into something almost inaudible. Say what you mean. Cesare looked at him, and all the warmth drained away. You should have burned St. Agnes when your father still breathed, he said. Instead, you sentimentalized it, paid the priest, protected strays. Matteo understood what institutions are for. You never did. I felt the bottom drop out of the room. Dante did not move. You sold Rosa. Cesare shut his eyes for one beat too long. I traded a location, he said, for peace. I thought she'd be returned. A sound left Dante then, not loud, not human either. I backed up without meaning to. Cesare reached inside his jacket. Dante was faster, but not fast enough to stop the powder burst Cesare threw into my face. Not poison, something blinding. My eyes flooded with pain. Arms caught me, someone shouted. Gunfire cracked once, twice, too close to walls. By the time my sight cleared to shapes, I was already being dragged through the service corridor by men I didn't know. I fought, bit, kicked. Heard Dante bellow my name somewhere behind me and knew, with sick certainty, that that was exactly what Cessair had wanted. They took me to St. Agnes, not the public front. The old service entrance around back, where paint peeled from the doors and the chapel bell no longer rang. Matteo Vescari waited in the former headmistress's office, hands in his pockets, smile almost kind. He looked like what Dante might have become if tenderness had rotted out of him completely. "Hello, Sophia," he said. "Welcome to the house that made us both." He had Dante's darkness without the breaks. He had my fear and knew it. And somewhere behind us, in the halls of the ruined home, time was already running out. St. Agnes had once smelled like soup and bleach and wet wool. Now it smelled like mildew, dust, and money that had sat too long in the dark. Matteo kept me in what used to be the industrial kitchen. I knew that only because the room still held the bones of it. Rusted prep tables, an 8-burner range gone dead, storage bins, and 40-pound flour sacks stacked against one wall like pale bodies standing upright. He'd zip-tied my wrists in front of me instead of behind, which told me something dangerous about him. Not kindness, confidence. Cessair stood near the door for the first hour, unable to look at me for long. That almost hurt worse. "You could stop this," I said once. His mouth twitched as if I'd asked him to reverse age. "It went too far a long time ago. That isn't an answer." "No," he looked at the floor. "It's a confession." Matteo laughed softly from across the room, where he leaned against the counter, turning Dante's stolen flash drive over between 2 fingers. "Don't expect courage at the end from men who built their lives on careful compromises," he said. "It offends the architecture." He liked hearing himself think. It was the first thing about him that felt small. The second was that he kept trying to explain Dante to me, as if owning the older wound gave him rights over the man. "We were boys here together," Matteo said. He had fists, I had imagination. He thought saving things made him strong. I learned much earlier that broken things are easier to move. He wanted me to flinch. I didn't give him that, not because I was brave. Because I finally understood something important. Men like Matteo fed on visible fear, and if I handed him mine, I would lose the little of myself I had left. So I asked, "Did you kill Father Tommaso?" Cessair looked up sharply. Matteo smiled. "No, he died disappointed, which is cleaner." There, a line, a wound, useful, hours passed, or maybe only one. The windows stayed black. Somewhere in the building pipes knocked like distant footsteps. My wrists burned against plastic. Then one of Matteo's men brought in tea. Wrong move. I smelled the bitter almond before the tray even hit the table. Matteo noticed my face and smiled wider. "What is it with you and poison?" I said nothing. He lifted a cup and drank from it himself, proving only one cup was meant for me. "I don't need you dead," he said. "I need you soft enough to be traded." He nodded to the guard. The cup was brought closer. I let my shoulders tremble, let my mouth shake when I took it. Let the fear show this time, but only the usable parts. My father used to say meringue collapsed if you fought the air instead of learning how to fold it. So I folded. The tea touched my lips, not enough to swallow. I coughed into my sleeve. Tilted the cup. Most of it ran down the front of my blouse and onto the floor. 5 minutes later, I let my head loll. Matteo came to stand over me. "See." "Easier?" His hand landed under my chin, turning my face side to side as if I were merchandise. I kept my breathing slow. When they finally left me alone with one guard at the far door, I opened my eyes. The zip tie cut when I twisted, but it didn't break. I scanned the room. Prep table. Dead oven. Open flour sack. Rusted pilot assembly on the old range. And there, hanging from a hook near the sink, an ancient box of kitchen matches probably left by God for dramatic timing. I nearly laughed. Instead, I worked. I edged the flour sack down with my foot, tore it with the corner of the metal table leg, and kicked a pale drift across the floor toward the dead stove. Flour dust rose in a ghost cloud. My hands were clumsy, numb, furious. I got the matches, broke 2, lit the third. If the pilot line still held enough gas in the abandoned pipe to catch, it would flare, not explode the building. Just enough to blind, frighten, and make every armed idiot in the room forget the quiet girl for 1 second. I struck the match. Nothing. I whispered something filthy. Then I heard it, click. Not the lighter, a gun's safety at the door. The guard had come back. I threw the match anyway. The old line coughed blue, then burst orange through the flower haze in a hard, bright whoomp that stole all the air from the room. The guard shouted. Fire licked up the front of the rusted range. Alarm wiring somewhere in the ceiling shrieked back to life after years of holy neglect. I ran, not elegantly, not fast enough to feel cinematic. Half blind, wrists bleeding, lungs full of flour and panic. But I ran through the service corridor, down a hall lined with children's drawings still taped to the walls under grime. At the stairwell landing, someone caught my arm. I made a sound I would deny under torture. Then I saw the face, Dante. There was blood on his shirt, soot on his cheek, and murder in his eyes so complete it looked like weather. He dragged me against him once, hard, one hand at the back of my head, as if checking I was made of something real. You ran toward the fire, he said against my hair. I started it, I coughed. For one impossible second, his forehead touched mine. Then Gio's voice echoed up the hall. Can we admire her criminal initiative later? I am bleeding through excellent tailoring again. I looked past Dante and almost laughed from pure relief. Gio stood at the corridor mouth in a sling and bulletproof vest, furious, alive, and holding a shotgun like an insult. Maria said if I let either of you die, she'd bury me next to the swan that attacked me in Turin, he said. Move! Dante cut the zip tie from my wrists with a knife from his pocket. His hands shook only once. Matteo's men were still firing from deeper in the building. Cesare was gone. As Dante hauled me down the stairs and Gio swore artistically behind us, I realized the rescue had already cost too much, and we were nowhere near finished paying. At the front doors, Dante looked back into the burning dark of St. Agnes. One more night, he said, and I knew he meant one of us might not survive it. The final battle happened where the money had always ended up. Not in church basements or donor lunches or city offices with polished wood. In a river warehouse that smelled like oil, wet concrete, and old shipping rope. Dirty places made for clean crimes. We found it because Cesare finally did one decent thing in the ruined ledger of his life. At dawn, a location was texted from his phone to Dante's private line. No message. Just an address on the East River and a timestamp 12 minutes old. Gio, pale and furious in the front seat, read it and swore. This is either remorse or a trap. Both, Dante said. He drove himself. Of course he did. I should not have been in the car. Everyone told me that in different languages and tones. Maria openly threatened to sedate me with kitchen wine. Gio asked whether my hobby had become armed disaster tourism. I went anyway because the last flash drive was with Matteo. The donor codes made sense fastest to me and Leo, and because I was done being protected into ignorance. Leo stayed hidden. That was the cost I had chosen and kept paying. Rain slicked the loading dock when we arrived. Men moved into position around us, dark coats, darker weapons. Dante handed me a bulletproof vest and fastened the side straps himself because my fingers were shaking too badly to manage the buckles. His knuckles brushed my ribs once, stayed a fraction too long. Another almost, absurdly alive even here. If I tell you to get down, he said, you do it before you think. I am capable of both. No, his gaze locked on mine. Not with me. That should have angered me. Instead, it terrified me because I understood what he meant. Around him, my instincts had become treacherous. I watched him instead of danger. Listened for him instead of myself. Dante, he touched the side of my neck, brief and burning, then stepped back before the contact could become anything else. Restraint, even now. Inside, the warehouse opened in echoing rows of crates and hanging sodium lights. Water dripped from corrugated beams. At the far end stood Matteo with 2 gunmen, the last flash drive in one hand and Cesare in the other, not physically, but morally. Because the old man was kneeling beside him. Suit soaked from the rain, hands bound, face already bruised. I stopped short. Dante did not. Matteo smiled. There he is, the sentimental king. Dante's voice was flat enough to freeze glass. Let her verify the drive. Still using girls to fix your conscience? Matteo asked. Very on brand. I stepped forward before I could be told not to. You moved children. Matteo looked at me as if I were an interesting stain. The city moves children every day. I just stopped pretending it was charity. Disgust cleared my fear like fire through paper. Cesare lifted his head then. His eyes found mine, then Dante's. I was wrong, he said. It was too small for the room, too small for Rosa, too small for the years. Matteo laughed softly. Now he discovers scale. What happened next broke too fast for memory to stack neatly. One of Dante's men shouted from the catwalk. Gunfire erupted. Crates splintered. Gio tackled me behind a pallet with a noise of pure suffering. This, he grunted, is why I carb load. I almost sobbed a laugh as bullets punched wood above us. Dante moved through the warehouse like judgment given human shape. No wasted motion, no performance. Matteo shot twice and missed once only because Dante shoved Cesare sideways, taking the old man to the concrete behind a forklift. That second cost blood. Dante jerked hard at the shoulder. I crawled toward the dropped flash drive while Gio covered me, muttering prayers that sounded suspiciously like menu items. Holy ravioli preserve me, Gio. Coping mechanism. My fingers closed around the drive, then Matteo saw me. He crossed the space between us with terrifying speed, grabbed a fistful of my vest, and hauled me up as a shield against his chest. A gun pressed to my ribs. The warehouse froze. Dante turned. Rain hammered the roof. Somewhere water dripped into a metal bucket with perfect, maddening rhythm. You always choose the room, Matteo called over my shoulder. That's your weakness. You see one crying girl and build a religion. Dante's face did not change. Let her go. Matteo smiled against my hair. Or what? You'll save another one too late. That line hit. I felt it leave Dante's body like heat. Something in Cesare broke first. No, he said, struggling to his knees. Then louder, rower than I'd ever heard him. No more children for peace. Matteo turned his head just enough. Dante fired. The bullet took Matteo through the side, not the heart. Enough to loosen his grip. I dropped hard, rolled, heard another shot, another. Men shouting. Gio dragging me by the vest collar toward cover while insulting my ancestors for making me stubborn. When I looked up, Cesare had somehow gotten between Dante and Matteo's final line of fire. The shot meant for Dante hit Cesare high in the chest. He folded with a sound I felt in my teeth. Everything slowed. Dante reached him first. Matteo, bleeding out by the loading dock, tried to raise his gun one last time. I didn't think. I grabbed the nearest thing, a steel hook from a coil of shipping line, and slammed it into Matteo's wrist. The gun skidded away. Dante finished it. Clean, final. Then he knelt in Matteo's blood and held Cesare as the old man drowned in his own. I traded your sister, Cesare whispered. Then I spent 12 years teaching myself not to say her name. Dante said nothing. Cesare looked once at me. You should have left. Probably, I said, crying anyway. A broken breath that might have been a laugh moved through him. Then he was gone. Silence came in pieces after that. Men lowering guns. Rain. Gio sitting down very suddenly on a crate and announcing he was too handsome for recurrent trauma. Dante stood at last, changed in some permanent way I could feel even from across the room. I went to him, not because I knew what to say, because there was no one else left who could stand there with him and understand the cost. He looked at the river beyond the open dock, then at the flash drive in my hand. Give it to Gio, he said. I did. Dante closed his eyes once, opened them. It is over, he said. War did not end cleanly. It ended administratively. Arrests, sealed records, men in suits pretending shock. Newspapers using words like network and corruption, as if language had only just invented evil. Gio spent 3 straight days on the phone calling judges, port authorities. And one furious bishop, while eating forbidden cannoli in Maria's pantry, like a man conducting diplomacy with sugar on his tie. Leo gave testimony through counsel and vanished into the kind of protection program that erased a person without technically burying them. We spoke twice a week through a number that changed every time. He was alive. It had to be enough. St. Agnes was closed. The surviving children were transferred to actual care. Father Tommaso got a real funeral this time, not the quiet one Matteo's people had forced before the scandal broke. Dante wore black and stood in the rain without an umbrella until the priest was in the ground. Afterward he came home, took off his coat, and sat in the kitchen while I made coffee. That was new. Not the coffee, him sitting while I moved. The house had altered since the warehouse, softer in the wrong places. Men still armed, doors still heavy, but grief had a way of sanding arrogance off a room. Even the silence sounded different now. Gio came in halfway through, sling finally gone, holding a celery stick like a personal insult. Maria says my cholesterol is an emergency. From the stove, Maria answered without turning. Because it is, he looked at me. This is abuse, document it. You ate mortadella at breakfast. I was healing. Maria crossed herself dramatically. From what? Manners, Dante, to my deep astonishment, almost smiled into his cup. That was the moment I knew we might survive ourselves. Not become innocent, never that, but survive. Weeks passed, then months. I began rebuilding the estate pastry kitchen with Maria, not because Salvatore money needed my labor, but because my hands still remembered how to belong to me when they worked. Dante funded a training program under St. Agnes' name for girls aging out of the system. We argued over the wording on the plaque for 10 full minutes because he wanted no family crest on it, and I thought anonymity could be another kind of vanity. You are impossible, I told him in his office. He leaned back in the chair, watching me with that unreadable stillness that no longer felt empty. And yet you remain. I looked away first. Some habits stay. The romance, if that is what people would call it from the outside, did not arrive like a flood. It arrived like winter thaw. Quiet, reluctant, everywhere at once it began. His hand at the small of my back in crowded rooms. Mine resting, just once, on his wrist when nightmares took him half out of sleep on the library sofa. The click of his silver lighter, in doorways before he came into a room where I was working. The way little flame changed from assessment to recognition to something I carried against my pulse all day after he said it. The first time he kissed me happened in the pantry while Gio argued with Maria about olive oil portions 3 feet away, not because we lacked imagination, because life, apparently, found that funny. Dante had followed me in after dinner to reach for a bottle on the top shelf. I turned, he turned, we stopped much too close. You're staring, I whispered. You're shaking, I am holding plates. His eyes dropped to my mouth, lifted, the oldest almost between us, sharpened and sharpened until it could cut. From the kitchen, Gio called, if anyone's making out near the flour, at least close the bins. I can taste scandal in pastry. I laughed. Dante exhaled once through his nose, wrecked by restraint and maybe by amusement. Then I said the thing that cost me. Don't stop this one. His gaze changed completely. He touched my face with both hands as if I were breakable in a way that mattered. Then he kissed me slowly, carefully, like a man crossing sacred ground barefoot. When it ended, my forehead fell against his chest because I did not know how else to stand. Months later, on a Thursday that smelled like rain and yeast, I found the ring in a flour tin. A plain gold band, heavy, warm from the kitchen. I held it up and stared until Dante appeared in the doorway. Jacket off, tie loosened, silver lighter turning once across his knuckles before he pocketed it. That is one way, I said, to propose to a pastry chef. His eyes stayed on me. I considered hiding it in a cannelot. Seemed medically irresponsible. I laughed, then didn't, because his face had gone too serious. This isn't a fairy tale, Sophia. I know. You'll never have a world untouched by mine. I closed my fingers around the ring. I know. He came closer, not kneeling, not performing. just standing there with all the weight of the man he had been and the one he was still trying to become. "Stay," he said, "not because you were forced, not because the gate closed. Stay because you choose me after all of it." Emotion rose so fast it made my throat ache. I slid the ring onto my finger myself. "Yes." His eyes shut for half a second. Then he took my hand and pressed his mouth once to the ring. "Little flame," he said, and this time the name held no possession at all, only wonder. Only home found in a place he had never expected to deserve it. That night, we sat at the kitchen table after everyone else slept, sharing burnt espresso and silence soft enough to live inside. Outside, rain tapped the windows. Inside, nothing tried to hurt us for one whole hour. It felt almost ordinary. 9 months later, the kitchen belonged to laughter again, not all the time. This was still the Salvator world. Men still came in with rain on their coats and guns under their jackets. Phones still rang at bad hours. Dante still carried darkness, like an old injury that healed crooked. But on Sundays, the training kitchen filled with girls from the St. Agnes program, and Maria ruled them with a wooden spoon and biblical force. And Gio wandered through pretending not to steal pastry cream while planning a wedding he still claimed he did not want, even though Maria had finally agreed to marry him after he survived 3 bullets, 2 diets, and 1 disastrous swan-related retelling at the engagement dinner. It wasn't a bird, he told anyone who would listen. It was organized malice with feathers. It hissed at bread, I reminded him. It knew my weaknesses. This was the morning of our first charity lunch in the rebuilt annex, press in the front hall, donors in the garden. A string quartet, somewhere outside, trying to make criminals sound civilized. I was in white linen, and an apron dusted with flour, whisking mascarpone in the old marble corner, where I'd once tried not to cry. The symmetry of that did not escape me. Unfortunately, memory doesn't become gentle just because life does. One of the donors, a woman I'd never met, said something careless in the garden an hour earlier about reform being an attractive word wealthy men used when they wanted their sins lacquered. She hadn't known I could hear her from the service arch. Maybe she wasn't even entirely wrong. That was what undid me, not insult, not exactly, the harder thing. The fact that love had not answered every moral question. The fact that I could build a life with Dante, and still sometimes stand in the shadow of what he had done, and wonder what part of me had crossed over to reach him. So I came into the kitchen and did what I had done the first night. I put my hand around the whisk. I kept working. My eyes burned. 1 tear slipped, then another. I wiped them away with the back of my wrist before they could fall into the cream. Dessert still had to go out. The girls were waiting for instruction. Maria was plating tarts. Gio was in the hall telling a reporter that true leadership began with refusing dry chicken. The room needed steadiness more than it needed my crisis. So I whisked. Then I heard it, click. The silver sound sliced softly through the kitchen noise and settled somewhere under my ribs. I looked up. Dante stood in the doorway with one hand in his pocket and the lighter in the other, exactly as he had the first night and nothing like it at all. No armed command in the room now. No locked door behind me, only my husband in a dark suit, tie loosened, watching me with an expression that still made it hard to remember my own name. He came closer, not quickly. Never enough to startle. "You're doing it again," he said. I laughed once through the sting in my throat. Apparently I have no growth. His eyes moved from the bowl to my face to the whisk in my hand. "Yes," he said quietly. "You do." The girls at the far tables sensed something sacred and scattered themselves politely toward the pantry under Maria's pointed glare. Gio peeked in, took one look at Dante's face, and backed out so fast he walked into a tray and blamed architecture. Dante stopped on the other side of the marble. "It still destroys me," he said. I swallowed. That was the thing I had wondered whether he'd ever say aloud. Not that he saw it, not that it mattered. What it cost him to witness the part of me that insisted on protecting a room before myself. I set the whisk down carefully. "There are things I still don't know how to live with," I admitted. About your world, about myself in it. His gaze didn't leave mine. I know, I chose you anyway. I know, that doesn't make every question disappear. No, he reached across the marble and took the damp kitchen towel beside my hand. The way he had the first night, only this time he didn't push it toward me from a distance. He stepped around the table. He stood in front of me. Then he dried the tears from my face himself, with absurd tenderness for a man who had once terrified cities. Little flame, he said, and the name now held the whole journey of us inside it. The fear, the ache, the wanting, the home. Loving me was never meant to feel clean. Something inside me eased simply because he did not lie. I put my palms flat against his chest, felt the steady beat under linen and bone and old violence. I know, I whispered. Behind him, the stove waited for the sugar glaze on the tarts. Dante glanced back once, thumbing the lighter open. Click, blue flame bloomed. He held it beneath the copper pan while I tipped in sugar, water, lemon. The scent rose bright and sharp. Around us, lunch prep resumed. Maria barked. Gio yelped. Someone laughed too loudly. Life, ordinary and impossible, kept happening. I whisked the cream. He watched the sugar, our shoulders touched. That was the radical thing, not the surviving, the staying. When service began, Dante leaned down and kissed my temple in full view of the doorway. The kitchen, the world we had built out of wrong choices and right ones and everything between. I did not flinch from being seen, neither did he. And if there was still one question neither love nor time had answered, it was this. Whether choosing a man shaped by darkness meant learning to carry some of that darkness yourself, or whether loving him and making him gentler was its own kind of fight. I still don't know. Would you have chosen Dante Salvator and let your old life burn for the chance to build this one?